They actually showed up at my apartment door, my parents, standing there furious, demanding to know why I had ruined Thanksgiving. My mother's face was beet red, practically steaming, and my father was leaning heavily on the doorframe, his voice low and dangerous. But the absolute kicker, the thing that makes my blood run cold and hot at the same time just thinking about it, was the man standing slightly behind them, my sister's precious, wonderful new boyfriend looking right at me, and what he said next shattered my entire view of my family and this whole ridiculous, agonizing situation. He looked me dead in the eye, and he said, "I know exactly why you were uninvited, and honestly, if I were you, I would have burned the turkey myself." Can you believe that? The person they brought in to judge me was the one who ended up defending me. It begs the question, which I want you all to weigh in on right now. Was I wrong for cutting off my entire family after finding out the truth, or did they finally push me too far? Now, to understand just how monumental that moment was, and why my parents were so apoplectic, we have to go back, way back, to the beginning of the Thanksgiving drama. My name is Alex, and I'm the designated black sheep of my family. I'm not talking about the fun, quirky black sheep. I'm talking about the actual, disappointing black sheep. My older sister, Sarah, is the golden child. She's everything my parents ever wanted. She's a successful corporate lawyer, drives a luxury SUV, and is planning a wedding to a man I'd never met but had been hearing about for months. A man who, according to my mother, was a catch straight out of a Hallmark movie. Me. I'm a freelance graphic designer who lives in a small apartment, drives a car that constantly threatens to become one with the side of the road, and my relationship status is perpetually, it's complicated with my cat. My parents don't hate me, not exactly, but they view my life choices with a level of disappointment that could curdle milk. They love me, sure, but their love always felt conditional, dependent on the shadow of Sarah's success. This dynamic isn't new. It's been the unspoken, heavy tablecloth over every single family dinner since I was in high school. Every conversation was a subtle comparison. Every compliment to me was followed by a glowing summary of Sarah's latest achievement. It was exhausting and honestly soul-crushing. This year, Thanksgiving was supposed to be a big deal, not just because it was a holiday, but because it was the official debut of the boyfriend, a man named Mark. Everything had to be perfect. My mother had been calling me for weeks not to talk but to issue instructions. "Alex, please, for the love of God, don't wear that threadbare band t-shirt," she'd say. "And don't talk about your silly art projects. Stick to safe topics. The weather, maybe, just. Be quiet and look pleasant." I tried to be understanding. I really did. I knew how much Sarah's happiness, and more importantly, the appearance of her happiness, meant to my parents. They lived for the approval of others, and Mark was the ultimate symbol of having made it in society. So I agreed. I promised I'd wear a decent sweater. I'd keep my mouth shut about the new webcomic I was illustrating, and I would try my best to be a non-factor. I even bought a ridiculously expensive bottle of wine to bring. A silent, peace-offering bribe for good behavior. The phone call came 2 days before Thanksgiving. It wasn't a casual chat. My mother's voice was tight, high-pitched, and clearly uncomfortable. She opened with the classic parental nervous preamble. "Honey, listen, this is really difficult to say, but..." And immediately I knew something terrible was coming. I braced myself. I thought maybe I was being relegated to the kids' table or asked to bring 5 extra folding chairs. But what she said next was so far beyond the pale, so genuinely insulting, that for a second I thought she was joking. "Alex, we've had to make some last-minute changes to the guest list," she finally choked out. I waited and, well, your father and I decided that it might be better if you celebrated Thanksgiving at your own place this year. Silence. Absolute ringing silence on my end. I felt the blood drain from my face. I asked her flatly, "Mom, what are you talking about? Why?" She took a deep breath, The classic martyr sigh she deploys when she's about to justify terrible behavior. And then she gave me the line that is now, forever, seared into my brain. She said, word for word, "Your sister wants her boyfriend to make a good first impression. She thinks having you there would make her look bad." The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of that sentence hung in the air. It wasn't about space. It wasn't about a sudden outbreak of a cold. It was because I was an embarrassment. My sister, the lawyer, the golden child, believed my mere presence, me, her own brother/sister, her blood relation, would detract from the perfect image she was trying to present to her perfect boyfriend, and my parents, my own flesh and blood, agreed with her. They were actively choosing the impression of a new acquaintance over the feelings of their own child. I felt a knot of cold fury tighten in my chest, a feeling that had been building for years but finally reached its snapping point. I didn't yell, I didn't plead, I simply said, "Got it." And then, without waiting for another word, I hit the end call button. I hung up. It wasn't a dramatic slam down. It was a quiet, deliberate act of severance. And the silence that followed in my apartment was the most peaceful, yet devastating silence I had ever experienced. I spent the next 2 days in a strange state of numb disbelief. I didn't reply to my mother's texts. A few tepid "we'll call you later," and "we love you, it's just a temporary thing," or my sister's complete silence. I ordered a frozen meal for Thanksgiving, put on my favorite threadbare band T-shirt, and watched a marathon of trashy reality TV. It was pathetic, but it was my pathetic, and there was a strange, grim freedom in knowing I was alone because they chose to exclude me, not because I was simply overlooked. The sense of betrayal was deep. A gaping wound that I hadn't realized was festering for so long. Every time they had subtly criticized my career, every time they had praised Sarah's extravagant lifestyle, every time they had made me feel like the lesser child, it all funneled into that one phone call. My worth to them was less than Sarah's carefully constructed facade. The peace lasted exactly until 10:00 a.m. the morning after Thanksgiving. The day after was always the cleanup, the leftovers, the forced politeness of the post-holiday wrap-up. Except for me, it was just Friday, and that's when the hammering started on my apartment door. Not a knock, a demanding, aggressive hammering. I looked through the peephole and my heart dropped. It was them, my parents, and standing just a step behind them was a tall, well-dressed man who could only be Mark, the boyfriend. I didn't open the door right away. I stood paralyzed, watching them. My mother was gesturing wildly, talking furiously to my father, who was scowling and pounding the door again. Eventually, I took a deep breath. I knew this was going to be ugly, but I was done hiding. I slid the deadbolt and pulled the door open. The immediate reaction was what I expected. My mother didn't say hello or how are you. She launched straight into a tirade. "What is wrong with you, Alex? Why didn't you answer your phone? Do you have any idea how much trouble you caused?" She was absolutely furious. My father stepped forward, his voice low and threatening. "Your mother spent the entire dinner worried sick. We had to make excuses for you. It was incredibly rude to hang up on her like that." I stared at them, completely dumbfounded by the audacity. They had uninvited me, told me I was an embarrassment, and now I was the one who was rude and caused trouble. I finally found my voice, and it was cold and steady. "I caused trouble, Mom. You told me I would make Sarah look bad. You told me my own sister didn't want me at Thanksgiving. What did you expect me to do? Send a handwritten thank you note for insult?" My mother's face twisted into an expression of theatrical shock, the kind she used when she wanted to manipulate me into submission. "That's not what I said, Alex. I said Sarah was stressed about the impression, and we just thought." She trailed off, unable to complete the lie in the face of my unwavering stare. It was then that Sarah's boyfriend, Mark, finally stepped into the light. He had been silent up until this point, a spectator to the family meltdown. He was impeccably dressed, handsome, and carried an air of quiet confidence, exactly the kind of man my parents fawned over. He looked from my furious parents to me, and then he let out a short, incredulous sigh. My parents turned to him, clearly expecting him to join their side, to deliver the final judgment. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I was standing in my doorway, facing a furious mother, a disappointed father, and the perfect boyfriend, who was the entire reason for my humiliation. I could have apologized, played the quiet victim, and tried to smooth things over, accepting their conditional love once again. Or I could stand my ground, tell them exactly what I thought, and risk severing the already fragile ties with my family forever. Before I tell you what happened next, and what Mark's next words were that completely blew the entire situation wide open, I want you to pause the video right now and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let it go, or would you have finally snapped? Tell me your choice. Okay, so Mark cleared his throat, and both my parents immediately focused on him, their faces switching from aggressive anger to expectant, fawning smiles. My mother chirped, "Mark, dear, please tell Alex he needs to respect his family." Mark didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes locked on mine, and his expression was one of profound sympathy, mixed with a healthy dose of pure disgust for my parents. And then he dropped the bomb. He looked me dead in the eye, and he said, "Alex, I know exactly why you were uninvited. And honestly, if I were you, I would have burned the turkey myself." My mother gasped, a sound like a punctured tire. My father started to sputter, "Mark, what are you talking about?" But Mark wasn't done. He was the golden boy, and now he was wielding his golden status like a weapon. He took a step forward, putting himself between my parents and me. "I'm talking about the fact that your daughter, Sarah, didn't think Alex would make her look bad because of his job or his car. She was worried he would say something about her being fired from her last job, or maybe the fact that she's only dating me because my father's firm is the one that got her out of that lawsuit she was involved in last year." The silence this time was truly deafening. My mother's jaw actually dropped. My father looked like someone had physically punched him in the stomach. My sister, the golden child, wasn't perfect after all. She was an utter mess who had managed to rope in a genuinely decent, if initially clueless, man by carefully curating a fake life. Mark went on, his voice firm and steady, addressing my horrified parents. "Sarah was hysterical all week. Not about the impression on me, but about the impression on my family. She was worried Alex, being the only one who seems to live in reality, might mention something that would expose her carefully constructed house of cards. She tried to convince me that Alex was troubled and unstable, and that's why he couldn't come. I overheard the conversation where she told you to give him the embarrassment excuse. I told Sarah that if she uninvited her own brother for lying to me, I was walking out right then and there. She begged me to stay. I agreed, but only if I could come here today and tell Alex the truth myself. I couldn't stomach the thought of you two." He gestured to my parents with a look of utter disdain, letting him believe he was an embarrassment for living his own life. My parents were utterly defeated. All the bluster, the fury, the manufactured outrage, it dissolved instantly into panic and shame. Their perfect world, built entirely on their daughter's perfection, had just collapsed, exposed by the very person they had invited to admire it. My mother tried to regain control, whimpering, "Mark, you don't understand. We were just trying to help Sarah." He cut her off coldly. "I understand perfectly. You were trying to protect a lie at the expense of your son/daughter. That is inexcusable." He then turned to me, offering a genuine, sympathetic smile. "Alex, I apologize for being part of the reason you were insulted like that. You seem like a genuinely good person." With that, Mark turned and walked away from my apartment door. He didn't say goodbye to my parents, he simply left. The confrontation that followed with my parents was short and final. They tried to backtrack, to explain, to apologize, but it was too late. The damage wasn't just the uninvitation. It was the years of subtle abuse, the conditional love, the blatant favoritism, and the willingness to throw me under the bus for Sarah's vanity. I looked at my mother, who was now weeping real tears, and my father, whose face was a mask of utter defeat, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, liberating emptiness. I told them calmly that they were no longer welcome in my life, that the way they had treated me was unforgivable, and that I finally understood that their approval was never worth the price of my self-respect. I told them that Mark was more family to me in that 5-minute conversation than they had been in my entire life. I closed the door and relocked the deadbolt. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. Sarah called, furious, accusing me of ruining her life and stealing her perfect boyfriend. Mark had indeed ended the engagement shortly after leaving my place, telling her he couldn't marry a liar. She never apologized to me. My parents sent a barrage of texts and calls, shifting between angry accusations and tearful pleas, but I blocked them all. I didn't see or speak to any of them for the rest of the year. I had my own quiet, peaceful life, and for the first time, I felt genuinely happy and free of that oppressive, conditional love. Eventually, Mark reached out. He wanted to make sure I was okay, and we've become good friends, bonding over our shared distaste for my family's theatrics. It was an unexpected, wonderful turn of events. I lost my family, but I gained a powerful sense of self-worth and a new friend who truly sees me for who I am. So that's my story. It's a long and painful road to realize that the people who are supposed to be your biggest supporters are actually your biggest critics. This Thanksgiving I was alone, but I wasn't an embarrassment. I was free. The moral of this story is simple. Never let someone else's insecurity make you feel like you are the problem. Your life, your choices, your path, they are yours alone. And the people who truly love you will celebrate them, not hide them. Like this video if you were on my side, subscribe for more stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I do the right thing by cutting them off? Let me know. I'll see you all in the next story.